And the British governing body of the martial arts sport Jiu-Jitsu has been forced into a humiliating backtrack after tennis legend and women's rights campaigner Martina Navratilova blasted their decision to allow trans athletes to compete against female athletes, calling it unconscionable. The British Jujitsu Association have since announced a review of their trans inclusion policy. It comes after US podcaster and UFC commentator Joe Rogan had this warning about people who are biological males identifying as females doing combat sport. Take a watch.
Imagine if the UFC had to have diversity. Do you know what a problem that would be?
Yeah.
If we had to have a certain amount of trans folks, you had numbers you had to achieve. It wasn't the best fighters.
Yeah.
It was just, who meets certain criteria. There's going to be a bunch of people that get murdered.
Sharron, wonderful to have you back on the show. So in combat and heavy contact sports, a biological man that identifies as female could potentially injure or indeed kill a woman in the sporting arena.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening to you and to everybody in the studio. And that's kind of the point. Men kick 50% harder and they hit 160% harder. They punch 160% harder. And that's of equal weight. Okay. So that's not someone bigger. That's someone of exactly the same weight. So in a contact sport, it literally is a serious injury waiting to happen. And jiu-jitsu isn't the only one. I mean, in this country, we have aikido, fencing, karate, taekwondo, and would you believe it, wrestling is also enabling males to actually fight females. I mean, it's just madness. It literally is a serious accident waiting to happen. And the government and UK sport have said you can't have inclusion and fairness and safety. Safety must come first. Fairness needs to come second. And then we must find ways to be inclusive. I think what's really also very interesting is that World Boxing is one of the associations that have said no. And the reason they said no was because men said they would not fight females. So they would not fight women who identified as men because they will then get manslaughter when someone gets killed.
Yeah, too right.
So I mean, we know this, and it's just so frustrating that we have to work so hard to get these governing bodies to just do the right thing.
Well, Sharron, I feel I'm living in a parallel universe. The idea that a biological man, fully intact normally, could be allowed to wrestle in a ring with a woman and then pick up a trophy, win a belt and possibly kill the poor woman. I can't believe I'm saying these words. So listen, let's talk about what's behind this, Sharron. Biological men participating in female sport is a very strange hill to die on. This is clearly the trans lobby overplaying their hands. Is this the moment at which the public say enough is enough?
The situation has been sort of reversed, though. So what happened in 2015 was that the IOC changed the rules, and then every governing body just went with it. So instead of turning around and going, well, where's the evidence? Show us the scientific proof that we can remove male puberty advantage, of which there's none. There's not a single study in the world that can show that, whereas there's 19 studies that show the opposite. They just went with it. So now what's happened is it's taken us 8 years to claw our way back, to world swimming, to world athletics, to world cycling. What else have we got? We've got rugby and we've got boxing. But every other sport, and in the UK, that's 60 other sports at the moment do not protect the female classification. And that includes things like football, cricket and tennis. And we've had injuries in football and cricket. We've had a young girl who's been very badly injured when a fully blown male was bowling a ball at them. So I just don't understand why we have to get to a point where people have to get hurt before we use common sense.
Well, indeed, if it's swimming like your sport, then it's just unfair. But if it's boxing or if it's rugby or wrestling or jiu-jitsu, it's bloody dangerous. I guess the trans extremists will always insist on biological men in women's sport, Sharron, because if not, it challenges the idea that you can change your sex. That's why they won't let it go. It kills the fiction that they're peddling.
Do you know what's really fascinating, Mark, was that World Aquatics turned around when they changed the rule last year and said we're going to protect the female category and said, OK, let's create an inclusion event, a special inclusion event at the World Cup in Berlin, which was at the beginning of this month, and we will have a trans event and we will, go out of our way to make sure that everyone is included. Guess how many people entered?
Go on.
None.
No.
No. Not a single one.
The world's gone mad. Listen, Sharron.
They want to be in the women's races where they can win. And that's the thing which is unfair.
What about the sort of counter-argument that actually the idea of letting biological males who identify as female into women's sport is a way of acknowledging how they identify? That's tied in with their mental health. Trans people are very badly treated in society. This is just a policy of being inclusive.
Yeah, and absolutely. And we can do that. You know, I don't understand why we can't be inclusive with people identifying however they like. And actually, in most women's sport, particularly in the States, we've had many transgender men, so that's biological females, who identify as being male. They're not on testosterone, but they still go and race with the women. And the women have no problem with it. So if the women can have no problem with it, why can't the men have no problem with the reverse situation?
Too right. Yeah, Sharron Davies, you remain my total hero. Keep up the good work and keep fighting the fight.
Thank you.
Now, the British Jujitsu Association, easy for you to say, have said the British Jujitsu Association governing body adopted a policy in an attempt to be inclusive and fair. That policy has never needed to be implemented at our national championships, as we've not had a trans competitor seeking to participate. However, we've now identified that the information that our policy was based on has been superseded, and as a result, we're now conducting an urgent review of our trans inclusion policy so that it reflects the current thinking. Would you like to know what I think about this? I don't think that biological men should even be participating in female tiddlywinks. Take that, shove it in your pipe and smoke it all day long.